Just want to let you
Oh,
guys know that knock is limited.
okay. All right, we are live here at the Analytics Den, and we got the good old round table right here with the man, the myth, the legend, Rams House, and of course, one of the other man, the myth, the legend, One Pride 40
Hey,
here at the round table, and we're gonna be discussing some football, some line stuff, anything else that maybe gets added, and maybe in the comments we might talk about, and same thing that they ever want to talk about something, we might bring that up. Yeah. So thank you guys for coming into the show. It'd be awesome if you guys do. And then, of course, do you guys have anything you guys want to start off with first, or anything else, or
No, we can
not so
jump
much?
into questions.
All
yeah.
right, awesome. All right, so first off, I think I want to talk about who's been like the most impactful free agent addition that wasn't Charles Harris. You know, I was seeing a lot of people complain that we don't have enough free agents because of injuries or whatever. Has the free agent addition been fine or bad, and who's been the best?
That's hard. I mean, I guess Elliott was pretty solid, but
Yeah,
which
Elliott
one?
might be the most impactful so far.
Yeah. Especially because we went a long time of having good strong safety. Last season we had to go for Will Harris and Dean Marlowe, and we both know that didn't go very well. We haven't really had a good strong safety since the Diggs era, and of course we've had mostly I've noticed we've had a lot of like good role players or like rotational or situational players. Like we had John
Mm-hmm.
Kaminsky, really situational player. We gotten Isaiah Buggs, good backup or situational player, but we haven't like really gotten a Charles Harris esque or Deshaun Elliott esque guys
Like we
other
were
than
all
him.
hoping that we would say, I'll say, oh, DJ Chark, but
Yeah,
that's been quite the opposite.
Did you say DJ drops?
DJ drops for real. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting. And do you think Brad Holmes will ever like get more free agents? I guess like it's
um,
kind of. I mean, when Pride were actually talking about this before this stream was starting, like he really hasn't been that aggressive in free agency. Is that just a Rams thing or?
No, it's a well. There's two reasons for it, right? The comp pick formula is one reason, right? He's always going to want to play the comp pick formula as best as he can so that he can get more draft picks. And the second reason is you don't really build through free agency
you
at
build to the
certain
draft.
times through the rebuild, right? So like the Lions are pretty early in the rebuild. Even if the Lions make the playoffs this year, which is looking more and more likely, they they're still in the foundation building aspect of the rebuild. So through that, it's like you really want to go unless there was like a really high impact player at a position they desperately needed. Like for example, in 2017 or 2018 when the 2017 when the Rams took Andrew Whitworth, right? Andrew Whitworth was really the only free agency in 2017 that they brought in. They brought in Andrew Whitworth and then a couple of smaller guys like Robert Woods, who was really not, who really wasn't a big free agent at all. Robert Woods was a pretty small level free agent, but that was the timing that they were at in the rebuild, and they already had some really high pieces. So like Aaron Donald, and they already had guys like Todd Gurley, stuff like that. So I mean, you could compare maybe DeAndre Swift to Todd Gurley, but they didn't have any impact defensive players. So there's just a lot of building to do. So it's like you don't want to spend that money because when you're talking about free agency players, you're talking about guys who are on a different age scale, right? And when we talk about the Lions are the youngest team in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
So do you really want to go pay a guy big money who's in his upper 20s or early 30s who's going to be kind of going the wrong direction as the rest of the team? Because you don't want a guy you're paying big bucks to be declining while the rest of the team is surging. That's not really the way that
Right. Well, I give you a good example too. Like we spent big money in 2019 when we spent it on like Justin Coleman, Trey Flowers. Um, those are the two big ones I remember. Then Jesse James. All were free agent bust.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's actually a great lead on to the next thing. What is Brad Holmes' best draft pick, and Do you think he'll continue being a good drafter if you do think he's a good drafter?
I do think he's a good draft.
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
Because draft picks always have to be evaluated based on their production versus their draft location. And like Pro Football Reference has this thing when you look at the draft picks historically.
Oh wait, you forget Rodrigo. What about Rodrigo?
Well, I mean, Rodrigo's played 2 games. Amon-Ra just broke NFL history, so it's hard to compare 2 games versus breaking, NFL history. But when you look at a draft on Pro Football Reference, there's this thing about average value or added value, rather. So they talk about how much value a player has added over the course of their careers, or for the drafting team. So it's like, I don't know. For me, it's always like, okay, who added the most value, based on where they were picked. And Amon-Ra right now, like, I don't know, if I checked right now, Amon-Ra might actually be like the most valuable player taken in the draft in 2020. Compared to, he's not, by the way, he's not, but he is in the top. He's about top 10 in added value. Obviously, Micah Parsons, Slater, Mac quarterbacks are always going to be favored in this. Mac Jones, Jamar Chase,
Sewell.
Sewell's not on here. He's just below Amon-Ra. But yeah, so it's pretty wild though. Amon-Ra could easily be, when it's all said and done, he could easily be top 5 on the added value list, being taken in the 4th round.
And so the good thing is Brad Holmes does have a history of doing a pretty good job of being on the tables for certain guys, especially like guys like Donald and Cooper Kupp. The one concern though is he does keep drafting players that get injured. Do you think that that's just an accident, or do you just think that he's willing to take a risk with some injured guys or something?
I mean, I don't think he's taking players that are injured. The only player he's drafted that was injured at the time of being drafted was J-Mo. And J-Mo was the best player in the draft. Certainly the best offensive player in the draft. Potentially the best player overall in the draft. I mean, when we talk about potential, there was no quarterbacks with top QB potential. I don't think, even no matter how big of a fan of Hutch you are, I don't think anyone really expects Hutch to be the best edge rusher in the entire NFL, right? I mean, like top 10 would be great. There's no tackles or guards that are really thought of but Jameson Williams has talent to be the best receiver in the NFL. So it's like, it's not a crazy thing to say that Jameson could be the best player in his position in football, and they got him in the middle of the 1st round. It's like, geez, man, that you picked that guy even if he just tore his ACL,
and you only gave up a 3rd to get him.
And people always talk about Levi and Pascal, but they weren't hurt when they were drafted. That's more bad luck. I don't really fault him for that at all.
So he's only drafted one injured player, and that's J-Mo.
It's like, okay, Levi, had some injury issues when he was drafted, but geez Louise, who coming out of college football these days doesn't have some injury history? It's like finding a guy who's never had an injury is pretty darn rare these days.
True.
It's actually pretty amazing that people want to like go after. Like I go on the POD forums on the website. I go on the POD Discord. I go on I'm on another one called the Den or something like that. That's another forum. I'm in a few places. Obviously, I've been on Luke G's Discord and stuff like that. And the amount of people who don't like the job he's done is just crazy to me. Like, man, get a grip,
Well, majority of his, we had a lot of hits in his last 2 draft classes. So.
A lot of hits, and not just like No, you know what? It isn't even a fair wording. You got a lot of home runs. Like Sewell is a home run. Amon Ra is a grand slam. Aleem McNeil is a freaking double. Like it's not even just like, oh yeah, we're getting guys who are productive. No, you're getting like legit NFL players.
Not to mention that you're getting value out of guys in later rounds. Amon Ra being a 4th-round draft pick, Malcolm Rodriguez being a 6th-round draft pick.
You know what it reminds me of? Analytic.
Yeah.
What?
It reminds me of the way people judge Goff. It's like they expect Brad Holmes to hit on every draft pick he makes. The same way that whenever Goff misses one throw, the whole world is falling down.
Yeah,
But he hits on the vital ones though the most.
Yeah, I remember when me and you, when everyone was just kind of talking about that, we were talking about with a guy when he's like, oh, he had too many missed throws, and he only had like a couple. I mean, more than you. I mean, of course, you would always like it if a guy didn't have some bad throws. But like, let's see. So there's a bunch of quarterbacks have already thrown a bunch of bad throws. Derek Carr threw 19. Carson Wentz threw 18. Joe Burrow threw 12.
I would say even beyond that, right? Like, yeah, the bad throw stat is great, but like, watch the games. Both games, Josh Allen missed 3 or 4 passes each game. Like, Matt Stafford has freaking had 5 horrific interceptions for the Rams and missed several other passes by a mile. Like Patrick Mahomes, we watch these games in voice together, streaming. Like every quarterback in the NFL is missing 4 or 5 passes a game, and oftentimes it's stuff like drop passes, it's stuff like miscommunication between the quarterback, and sometimes they just don't throw the ball very well. People
just got to with a 6.8 QPR.
We're talking about good quarterbacks. Oftentimes people got to realize that a quarterback's like job is to basically predict where people are going to be. Like I remember there was one play. Remember when Swift was in the backfield, he ran out to the outside on the left side, and he ran for the end zone, and Goff tossed it and was a little bit in front of Swift, and everyone's like, "Oh, what a bad throw! What a terrible throw!" And Joseph Dion came out and was like, I know everyone says it's a really bad throw, but you got to remember that Swift has a hurt ankle, and he's probably not running as fast as he was all offseason when Swift and Goff were working out their chemistry. And it's such a really intelligent point because Goff isn't predicting. He's not doing trigonometry in his head and being like, well, Swift's running, 1.2 miles per hour slower than he normally does, so let me put it here. No. He's going off of muscle memory and rhythm and chemistry that he's built up with these guys. He's throwing to the spot where he has thrown to before based on what's happening. And so it's like, it's such a really interesting thing that Dion picked up on because that's really what it's about. And the same thing can be said about Brad Holmes, really. He's doing like the Amon Ra pick. He had picked a guy like Amon Ra before. His name was Cooper Kupp. A guy that everyone said wasn't athletic enough, wasn't fast enough. And then what happens? Brad Holmes goes, wait, we have GPS data. With pads on, Mr. Amon Ra is pretty dang fast. And look what we have now. We have Amon Ra on an end around, having the second fastest running person in the NFL, ball carrier in the NFL in 2 weeks.
Yep.
I'm seriously anymore. They're relying on GPS.
Well, he's relying on his history, right? Like he was there when Aaron Donald was drafted. He was there. Like, this guy knows what he's doing.
Didn't he pound the table for him?
Yes. Aaron Donald, Jared Goff were two of the one, as an assistant GM, you don't hear those guys very often. The one time you hear about an assistant GM is when he's like obsessed with a player and that player gets taken.
Yep. And it's completely true. I mean, a lot of people, I think a lot of people like when they expect perfection out of a lot of spots, especially in our fan base exclusively. I remember I saw a lot of people when Hutch didn't get 3 sacks versus Philly or whatever, they were freaking out. They were saying, he was a bust because he didn't have this great stat line. Then
he had 3 sacks.
Yeah, and then he goes ahead and needs 3 sacks versus the Commanders or whatever.
It'd be more concerning if he didn't go through the line, but he did during the Eagles game.
Yeah. Well, and more importantly, I even saw people still downplaying Hutch's 3-sack game. Saw a guy say he needed
Oh, of course.
4.5, and I'm like, oh my word, stuff like that can happen. There are people saying, oh, he isn't taking double teams, whatever. Just there's some people you can't satisfy. There's some people who they're just so stuck in
Did
the.
you see the double team stat that came out today
I
from
did
week
not. I
2
did not.
updated? Hutch is the most double teamed edge defender in the NFL.
Wow, as a
He
rookie.
was he was
Already, man.
he was double teamed more than 30% of his snaps through 2 weeks. Yep.
Oh my word, that's
Wow.
crazy.
I told you when we were watching the game. I remember because Onepride, you weren't here this week, but but analytics showed up about halfway through the game, and I said analytic because he wasn't doing nothing in the second half, and I was like, dude, watch, he's getting double, triple teamed almost every snap now because of the 3 sacks. They were just terrified of him, and they were just focused on him, laser focused on him.
Oh yeah.
Now, do you think he'll put up more sacks throughout the season, though?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that one of the craziest parts about the 3-sack game, right? Like, I think the kind of unintelligent way to look at it is go, oh, well, he didn't just outright beat someone and pick up a sack. What he did was he hustled. And if you watch, so I don't know if you guys saw this, but Joe Thomas, probably one of the best left tackles in NFL history, did a video talking about Hutch. And that's what he said. He's like, dude, the most impressive thing about Hutch is that he didn't outright beat anyone to get those sacks. He goes, 50% of the sacks in the NFL, he goes, talk to coaches, talk to linemen, talk to edge rushers, and they'll tell you, when you watch film, 50% of the sacks in the NFL come after the original block is done. They're called hustle sacks. Everyone knows what they are. They're high motor sacks, right? And he goes, to get 3 of those, because he goes, we know Hutch can beat people. We know he's going to beat people and get sacks, but he's relentless, man. And so he goes, the thing is hustle sacks aren't like, oh, somebody else would have got him if Hutch wasn't there. It's like, no, probably no one would have got it if Hutch wasn't there. Did he do it immediately? No, but that might have been nothing instead of a sack. And so you should watch the video. Joe Thomas is praising Hutch, going, dude, what an impressive performance. He was more impressed by the fact that they weren't immediate, one, because beating someone immediately is less consistent than being a guy like Hutch getting it's harder than doing the high motor hustle sacks, man, because working that crazy is just wild. I was impressed, and apparently so was Joe Thomas.
Yeah.
Oh well, yeah, he's been a stout edge rusher, and we've been begging for a pass rush for how long now? 5 years.
You know what this does show? Analytic, this does show that Joe Thomas wasn't trained by Ray Lewis, though. So
It.
Oh wow.
It's true. But the biggest thing is, it's like I said, you can't satisfy every single person in the world, right? I remember we always used to have conversations with guys in our other servers, and they would just be pessimistic no matter what happens. I mean, even look at Jared's performance last week versus the Commanders. I had somebody say he had like a C grade for him, even though he threw for 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. It just wasn't that good of a day, I guess, apparently, because he missed a couple throws.
Who cares? I mean, we won, so who cares?
Exactly. And so it's just, if people act like that, you're not going to be able to convince them. And
right.
so
Right. Now, if we lost, it'd probably be a different story. But we won.
Yeah. No, there's still such thing as still good games. Like Lamar's game against Miami was still a good game. It's just Miami went crazy.
How many? Yeah, I don't know how Tua is still. I don't know. Do you think Tua improved at all, or?
I didn't watch the game. I just know he had a lot of touchdowns. I didn't end up watching that.
We'll need more time to see Tua, but he has just way better weapons than he had before, and obviously it was an important, regardless of maybe the passing of the football, it was definitely a big time poise moment. I mean, he came back on a team that's pretty hard to come back on. Not Lamar, but the Ravens defense is legitimate.
Yep. All right. So what players have surprised you on this Lions team? I guess there's players that we kind of expect to do good, and maybe they do better than we expect, or players we didn't expect to do good. What's a player that surprised you, or maybe a couple players that come off the top of your heads that
Like we
surprised
all expect. That one's hard, to be honest.
you? I mean, I'm going to say it off right at the bat. I think DeAndre Swift was probably the biggest surprise at least in the level.
we should do positive surprises and negative surprises.
All right,
Well, I
that's
think
actually
he-
that was I was going to say next was what players that disappointed you actually was my next
So
question.
top 3
Oh, I forgot.
positive
Yeah, we'll go
surprises. Top 3 positive surprises probably has to be Swift, Okuda, and I'm actually gonna say Deshaun Elliott, but man, you could easily go with Rodrigo because even though we were all hyped about Rodrigo, he's actually been super, super steady in the run game. I mean, like, we got to remember how small this guy is, how young he is. Like, he's been really freaking because what he's done in the run game hasn't been. He's not an athletic freak of nature. He's not huge. He's so smart and so instinctual, man, and he doesn't get rattled by anything. It's so awesome to watch because he's just the intangibles, the instinct, and the football IQ for him is off the charts. And so it's all. I think it's always a little surprising when you see that succeed in the NFL because it's such an athletic league. And it's not that Rodrigo's a bad athlete. It's just like, man, obviously he was a 6th round.
in the Raz.
He was a 6th round pick for a reason, right? He's so and he's legitimately been a top tier run defender, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, he scored a really high Raz.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like, let's see, I can pull it up. Let's see. He's not especially fast. Well, I mean, is he explosive? I don't remember his Raz off the top of my head, but yeah, go ahead, analytic. I'll look it up.
Yeah. Well, and there's also a ton of players with good Raz that completely fizzle out in the game. I mean, he fell to the 6th round because, for the most part, because he was small, and he also played in a very pass-heavy competition, so I don't think he got to really show his run-stuffing ability.
No, he actually had a really, really good Raz. He is pretty fast. He doesn't really play with that. Like, he doesn't really play with that speed though. He's not running all over the field like at an extremely fast rate. He's running intelligently. Is what he's doing. Dang, he's strong. He had 36 bench presses. I didn't realize that. That's a 10 score on the Raz on bench presses anyway.
Jeez, man. So I remember you showing me that actually when he got drafted.
He's athletic, but it's the IQ stuff that he's doing that is just awesome. Because athletic players are a dime a dozen, realistically.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in a world where everybody's athletic, everybody has high RS scores, especially in this NFL game where everybody's just insane. I will say that there was 3 players that have surprised me so far. Number 1, of course, being Swift. He looks like a whole different animal. That man followed through Staley in that Hard Knocks about being greedy for yards, getting vision, bouncing outside, running over people. He's been popping off, man. Better than even I expected. I'd also say another player that kind of surprised me. You guys already kind of said these other names, but I'll also say Brock Wright has kind of surprised me. Brock's been good in blocking. And there's a couple times where I thought he was Hutch. Like there's one time I even said, "Oh, not Hutch, sorry, Hawkinson."
Hawk.
And I was like, "Oh man, it's Hawk! It's Hawk! He must have made that catch, like that catch in week 2 for the Commanders." I thought that was Hawkinson, but no, it was Brock. And I'm like, this guy's actually showing some stuff, and I'm actually surprised that he's doing this well.
Mm-hmm.
And I would probably say the last player I think is kind of been a pleasant surprise for me. That I'm trying to think of one maybe that isn't like the traditional answer, but I also say maybe Isaiah Buggs. He was getting a lot of praise by that. I think his name Kyle Menanke. Think about that. He's really effective about not letting too much gaps happen. He's made a couple nice tackles. He's been really good about being in culture. He's posted on Twitter a bunch of times that he wants to be a Lion forever. And so that I feel like those are kind of like guys that surprised me more than I thought they would do. Maybe that aren't like the first guys that you think on top of your head.
Right.
So now negative surprises.
Negative.
I'll
DJ
give you
Chark number 1.
Yep.
Hawkinson has to be number one for me. Hawk has got to be number one for me. I'll give you one that's maybe a little under the radar. I've been a little disappointed with Aleem McNeil.
Really?
He's been virtually a no-show so far.
Yeah, I actually kind of got to agree there. I was noticing the other day he had like the exact same stat line as Isaiah Bugs, and Bugs played less snaps than him. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I tend to notice some stuff. I haven't really noticed Aleem being like crazily double team, triple teamed. I mean, he has 3 tackles is all he has and they're assisted tackles. That's all he has for the whole season so far.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess I just expected a bit of a step forward from last year. And I don't think I've seen that yet. I feel like he's playing at last year's level or lesser. And I wanted to see him take a step forward, especially when you see, a guy like Hutch is getting triple teamed more than 30% of the time. It's like, okay, well, then guys like Aleem should be taking advantage on those single coverage snaps, and he's not.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Bugs been getting the double teams, though.
Yeah. Well, I would also say, like, the big thing is, a nose tackle doesn't generally always make a whole bunch of big plays, but my big thing is I think Isaiah Bugs has gotten more playing time the more the season's gone along, and I don't know if it has so much to do just with Bugs' play, but also maybe McNeil hasn't been doing amazing.
Mm-hmm. So it's going to be hot.
Yeah,
one thing that you got to remember too, though, is like against the Eagles, for example, that really hurt us is everyone say, "Oh, well, Harrison and Hutch are over pursuing." Well, if the middle was pushed in, then it wouldn't be nearly as big of a problem. But they were over pursuing, and the middle wasn't getting pushed in, and Hurts just had tons of room to run all the time, and that's got to fall on McNeil.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess maybe Brockers also has to be part of that, but you're totally right. I mean, of course, they were over pursuing. I think I did remember. I think it was Glenn maybe talked about it, but I think you're totally right. McNeil's not done the impact. I remember he was getting all kinds of hype in this offseason. I remember Onepride and me were even talking about the other day that defensive tackles weren't doing as much impact as we were expecting. And I kind of have to agree with you on that one, even if it may not be extremely popular.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, my 3 disappointments were Armani, Chark, and Hawk.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Amani, I don't think has been disappointing in the fact that I didn't think he was going to do anything crazy, and he's just been hurt for a game.
Amani is who I thought he was. Anyway.
Yeah. I didn't have high expectations for Amani really at all. I even thought Okuda was going to be better than him, and that's exactly what's been going on.
Yeah, but Amani's been burnt toast, though.
Well, I mean, he was 2 for 9, but again, that's what me and Rams House thought, so I wasn't too surprised. I didn't, I think Amani is okay cornerback too, but I just didn't expect too much from him. And I would also say maybe T.J. Hawkinson has to be up there as well in terms of just disappointing. I mean, I think I saw a stat today that T.J. Hawkinson leads the league in drops right now, and he's also he's looking unmotivated as a blocker. He's just not looking like the T.J. Hawkinson that I absolutely loved coming out of college.
Well, he only had one dominant game. That was his debut.
You're absolutely right. He's only had that one game since his rookie year. So I gotta agree that he's been just disappointing. I was really expecting this year to be like the breakout year for TJ because we signed DJ Chark to spread up the field. Amon-Ra's broken out. Josh has also become a slightly better weapon, even earning that nickname, the Praying Mantis or whatever. And I really thought, okay, this is the year that there's not going to be a bunch of people on Hawk like there was last year. Goff and him have chemistry. He's hanging out with Kittle again this offseason. He's going to go crazy, but instead he's just been dropping and not been doing much blocks. And
I just don't think he doesn't care anymore. Does he? My question is, does he want to be here?
I don't see how he wouldn't, but
yeah, I don't think it's that. He's just I don't know if he just wasn't working on the fundamentals. I really don't know what's been going on with Hawk. He's not looking at all like what me and Rams House were talking about the other day. Back at Iowa, he was this great blocker. He even talked about how he loved the block and how he even kind of like would always go to stretch out the block. He doesn't seem to do that anymore. And it's not like his drops are even like like super hard or whatever. He dropped like an easy 5 yard catch week one, and then he dropped another one week two as well. Like it's not like his drops are like bad throws or anything. It's just they're easy drops. They should have caught.
The only one that's been truly consistent right now, like in the receiving core, it has been Amon-Ra. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, I think it's a better indication of Jared than maybe just the receivers.
Well,
but
I think Reynolds has been consistent. He's just not gotten very many snaps. I mean, so my favorite number to look at when it comes to receivers is always yards per target, because targets are the limited quantity in this scenario. And Josh Reynolds is putting up 11 yards per target, which is he's just not getting the rock very often. So it's like TJ Hawkinson's putting up 4.6 yards per target. DJ Chark's putting up 4.3.
What about Amon-Ra?
7.5, which, believe it or not, it's not that good.
Like Amon-Ra?
7.5 is not a very good number. I mean, it's fine. It's like above average, but like Cooper Kupp last year had like almost 11. So Amon-Ra has some room to grow on a per target basis as far as how many yards he's getting per target.
But he's getting a lot of yak though.
He's getting decent yak. Let's see. He's he's also had a few drops this year already, which is crazy because I don't think he has two drops. I don't think he had any drops last year.
I think he had the one versus San Francisco, and that was it.
His yak per reception is 5.1 yards, which is really nothing wildly good. It's not bad, obviously, but it's not like crazy. A lot of guys, that are pretty good sit in the 5 to 7 range. So he's kind of in that. He's not like breaking any records with yak or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, pretty solid overall, obviously. But Reynolds just needs more targets, I think.
Yeah. Well, and he also got to remember week one he also had that near giant touchdown. He just ended up dropping it. I just think maybe it's rust. Maybe it's just not.
So
I don't know. Maybe not enough situations yet.
Targets when he comes back? Does he get some targets when he comes back, or is it still going to go to like Amon-Ra and Reynolds?
I didn't hear any of that.
There was a lot of background noise when you were asking that question.
Oh, okay. Now, do you think that J-Mo's gonna get a lot more targets when he comes back, or you think those targets are still gonna go to Amon-Ra and like Reynolds?
I think J-Mo's gonna get a lot of targets when he comes back. Yeah, well, I don't see how he wouldn't.
I mean, he's gonna be a number one receiver. I still think probably Amon-Ra will be the most targeted, but Jameson's just gonna continue to be the guy that gets the most.
Well, he's a new
big plays in there, and that's the reason I'm excited to see him. Is he's going to be the explosive receiver, but I don't know. I think it also just depends on also what Jared Goff's doing, what the offense is doing, how Ben Johnson keeps doing, which actually leads to my next question of, Jared Goff's had a really nice 7-game streak. He had 17 touchdowns to, I believe, 3 interceptions in the last 7 games, and do you guys think that Jared Goff keeps this up? I mean, he's on a pretty good game streak, or do you think he plays even better? What's your guys' thoughts on the streak of Jared Goff?
I'm impressed. I'm impressed, even though I'm not the biggest Jared Goff guy. You guys know that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing with Jared Goff's 7-game streak is it's been. I don't think it's necessarily been a surprise. I mean, me and Rams House were out here hyping him up this offseason, but I think it's what I thought was going to happen. I mean, the big thing is the one thing he is living up to my expectations on is he's handled the O-line pressure so well, man. That touchdown to Amon-Ra, gets hit by 2 guys, even has to kind of like do a little bit of a jump and still makes a nice throw to Amon-Ra right where Monroe could get it. The team has not been perfect. We've had, I think we're number 2 in the league on drops. And
Yeah, well, these drops are getting bad.
yeah, he's been hit, I think, 10 times. He's honestly not been dealing with perfect situations.
But they're number 1 in the NFL on drops now, by the way.
We're number 1. Yeah, okay, we're number 1 in drops. Everyone's always saying, "Oh, Jared Goff needs everything to be perfect." Not everything's being perfect, and he has still had 2 straight weeks of having 35 plus points. He's had 2 good games, and he's been leading the team to, I think, good offensive success. I mean, we're the second-ranked offense in the NFL, and Jared's impressed me in the fact that he's able to lift this team up more than I think people are giving him credit for.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about, there's definitely some rust on Jared's part. I think not playing the preseason will do that. Other players who didn't play in the preseason have shown that, like Mahomes has shown a great deal of rust as well in the first couple games. So I don't think that's something that's exclusive to Jared. But things that people were unhappy with last year that he was doing, like not throwing the ball downfield, his intended air yards this year are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th in the NFL at 8.5. So his intended air yards per pass attempt is 7th in football. Last year, I believe it was last or very close to the bottom. No, it was dead last year. So that's improved. Then the other thing was he wasn't being aggressive enough on third downs. He was second to last in the NFL last year, and how close to the sticks he was throwing balls. You all right there, Onepride?
Yeah, I'm fine.
And a lot of background noise.
Yeah,
coming.
keep sounding like you're adjusting or whatever.
No, I'm just reading the comments.
Yeah, just when you adjust or whatever, I guess maybe just try to mute yourself with this pretty loud.
Okay, sounds good.
And then, so those are 2 of the biggest things that people complain about that he's now top 10 in. And I know people are disappointed that like the deep shots, the 40, 50-yard passes aren't connecting yet, but he's attempting them. And like he said on the thing, he goes, I heard him on a radio station. Realistically, we're inches away from connecting, and we'll start getting a rhythm. And that we'll start connecting on those deep shots, and it will really elevate the offense. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy with his start so far. I think he could be a lot better, though. I think because I know, and I've seen what he can do, and I think he can be better. I think he's it's one of those neat things where it's like, okay, what do we know Jared does well? What has Jared historically struggled with? Well, he's actually doing really good in things that he's historically struggled with. His pocket presence is the best it's ever been. His pocket movement is the best it's ever been. So by a lot, like he's improved in that area significantly. And then you're talking about stuff that he's not doing well that we know he can do well, like the deep ball, like being more accurate. Last year he was top 5 in accuracy on target throws in the NFL. He was 7th in the NFL in on target throws last year. So, yeah, it's actually kind of interesting to see that things that I would have wanted as a Jared Goff fan, I would have wanted him to improve. He's improving on, and the things that he had historically done really well are the things that he's not doing as well. That makes me hopeful because I know he's going to correct things that he's historically done well. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's more room for him to grow. That doesn't mean he's going to have 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions every game, but I think it certainly could mean more yards and higher yards per completion and that kind of stuff. More explosive plays from him. So yeah, I'm excited. As good as the stretch has been, and it's been really good. 104.9 quarterback rating. 17 touchdowns, 3 picks, 66% completion. As the drops get under control and Jared gets some of that rust off of him and he starts being a little bit more accurate and starts being a little bit more in control, I think we could see some really special stuff from this year. I put the Lions, my prediction was Lions top 10 in offense. I'm looking pretty good so far. And I think, by the end of the year, I think it's very possible that we are all agreeing, except for the real hard haters, that Jared's a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah. Well, and he's also just improved in general. Like, Tim 20Man reported that actually I'll show the thing there, but he was a 7 of 10 on throws of 10 plus yards in week 2. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
7 of 11 for 143 yards, 3 touchdowns, by throwing the ball at least 10 yards down the field against the Commanders, and he had a 146.8 rating. And that's something that he still kind of did. Like Arizona, he did that kind of things in Minnesota, but he's been more consistent about it, and I think it's really exciting to see.
Yeah, it seems like he went from basically only throwing short to later in last season successfully mixing in more intermediate throws from like 10 to 30 yards. And but I know for a fact he can absolutely hit those 30 to 60 yard passes. So when he starts mixing those 30 to 60 yarders in to already being really accurate in the short and the mid level passes, it's going to be really fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they'll get better, especially once Jameson comes in and Chark also starts catching a football a little bit.
I think Jameson is going to make an incredible difference. I'm telling you guys, if you didn't watch the 28 season, like a lot, the Jared Goff and Brandon Cooks had a really, really good connection. They had a really good chemistry. Jared and Brandon were hitting deep. I mean, Jared didn't have the highest completion percentage on passes that traveled over 20 yards.
Was that his favorite target, or was it Cooper Kupp?
Cooper Kupp was his favorite target, but Brandon Cooks was his favorite deep target. And like I said, top completion percentage on passes that traveled through the air 20 or more yards in 2018 was Jared Goff. And a big reason for that was his connection with Brandon Cooks. And Brandon Cooks is the only deep threat he's ever had in his career. So I think J-Mo comes on the scene and gives him Brandon Cook plus, and I think it could be really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like 2018, Brandon Cooks had 1,204 yards, 15.1 yards catch, and 5 touchdowns. That dude was going crazy.
17.9 per catch, over 1,200 catches, or over 1,200 yards. I mean, the Brandon Cooks Goff connection in 2018 was incredible, and yeah, I think that it's going to change a lot for Jared when that comes back. It's the guys who have that kind of speed where it's like Tyreek Hill speed, where it's like Tua's literally just tossing the ball as far as he can downfield and then just trusting that Tyreek is going to get under it because he's so fast. It's like J-Mo has that kind of speed. Not that the accuracy doesn't matter, obviously, but there's a lot more trust that you're not going to overthrow that guy.
So you're telling me that J-Mo's going to have a bigger impact than Amon-Ra?
I would think so.
I think so, yeah. And not just because the deep ball passes, but because Amon-Ra, it's like one of the things they're doing right now is taking over. They are really putting a lot of attention on Hawkinson. I'm sure the attention of Amon-Ra is going to pick up. It's easier to flood the short intermediate parts of the field with defenders when there's no deep threat that you really have to be scared of. So what a deep threat does is really impactful to an offense, but also J-Mo's not just a deep threat. He's a freaking potential top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. So I think his impact will be bigger, yeah.
Yeah, do you think he'll be better than Cooks was that 2018 year? Or do you think it's going
to Not this year. No, not this year. Probably next year, though. I mean, realistically, he's coming off an injury. They have virtually no time together throwing yet. But like I said, that kind of speed speaks.
Yeah. Okay, and then the next thing is the offense has been pretty explosive. I think we all talked about that. But the defense has been struggling. Do you think the defense will improve? Is that just something that needs reps, or is it just because we're missing so many players? Like we're missing Levi, we're missing Pascal. Amani was hurt week 2. Do you guys think that's kind of the issue, or do you think it's just going to be something that's not going to stay that good?
Well, we were talking in the off season. We didn't expect the defense to be like top 10. We were expecting it to be like mid. Just be mid. Don't be like you're not gonna. I'm not expecting it to be like top 5, top 10.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, it's too early to really judge on that defensive side because what's happened is they got blown out by the Eagles in game 1, and we haven't really seen what's happened overall with them because they did pretty good against the Commanders. Honestly, it was a decent game, but it's going to take a couple games for the stats to normalize. Right now, they're 31st in points allowed, they're 30th in yards allowed. I do expect them to get better though. Obviously, assuming there's not injuries. But there's been the safety duo has been good. Hutch and Harris have been good. Okuda's been good. Rodrigo's been good. So there's been that's 6 pieces on the defense that are
So why are we struggling then?
good. Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, the other positions are horrible. Amani, Will Harris, the quarterbacks have been picking on those two all day long. They've been picking on Anzalone in the run game and in the pass game. And against the Eagles, like I said, Hutch and Harris got some good pressure on the outside. They maybe even over pursued, but the middle wasn't getting pushed in at all. So talking about Aleem McNeil and Brockers weren't doing their job at all. And it kind of falls apart. And then the last thing that really needs to be said is schematically, it's been lacking. I think the defensive scheme, defensive play calls have been lacking. There's room to grow there. So we'll see what Aaron Glenn does as far as growth in that area. But there's bright spots. Like last year, there was no bright spots. Name one thing about last year that you're like, oh, this is exciting. Tracy Walker, maybe that'd be the only thing.
Yeah, there's only 2 players that were even decent or good, and that was Harris and Walker.
And this year you have 6 players that you're like, okay, these guys could be difference makers. Okuda's legitimately been Okuda's not just out there getting reps. He was playing against Scary Terry. He was playing against freaking Devontae Smith, and those are 2 top 20 receivers, man.
Are you locked him down?
I have Terry in my top 10, so he's definitely doing some work. And the safety combo's been good in the run game. They've been good in the pass game. So yeah, I think that it can improve. Let's just put it that way. Schematically will be helpful, and then once certain players step up a little bit and stop being, big time negatives, I think it will help for sure.
Okay,
I would say Jerry Jacobs.
We need Jerry Jacobs. Is that what you said?
From last year?
Oh, from last year. Oh, I don't know if he was a very exciting player.
I guess for an undrafted player, sure. I mean, I don't think he was anything when I'm talking about bright spots are guys that I think can be contributors on a top 15 defense. And I don't think Jerry Jacobs is a contributor in a top 15 defense. He was a bright spot as in he overperformed being a UDFA. Sure. Yeah.
All right. And what's your guys' thoughts on the first 2 weeks? Of course, we beat Commanders, and some saying, oh, we can only beat the bad teams, so we'll just lose to Philly. Do you guys think that this will, make the Vikings game go well or bad? Do you think that the fact that we nearly beat the Eagles makes us, have a better chance at beating the Vikings? Or are you guys kind of, concerned since we allowed, 27-plus points in both the first 2 games?
Well, I will say this, though. We almost beat the Eagles, and the Eagles just straight up blew out the Vikings. If you want to beat the Vikings, my guess, you need to stop 2 people. You stop those 2 people, and I think you win the game. That would be Jefferson and Cook.
Well, I think Cooks is the person to stop because when you force Kirk to throw, as we saw yesterday, he is nowhere near as good. I think that even makes Jefferson not play as well because when Kirk Cousins is under pressure, he does not play well. And Kirk was under pressure all day versus Philly. He was getting owned. And he kept throwing at Darius Slay like Darius Slay was his own receiver. And I think we have the pass rush. We have Aiden Hutchinson. We have Charles Harris. And I think we could very well do the very similar result and just pressure Cousins. I think all we need to do is just stop Dalvin
Now,
Cook.
who needs to step up for us to stop Dalvin Cook? Can we really rely on Hutch just to set the edge?
No, Rodrigo has to step up. Lee McNeil has to step up.
Yeah.
And our safety combo could really come up and help with that too. I mean, that's part of Cook's game is making one guy miss, right? They put him in positions where he just to make one guy miss, but those guys can't miss. Okudah could really make a big difference. If Okudah ends up one-on-one with Cooks on the outside, he needs to make that tackle. So it surely is a winnable game. The defense, the Minnesota defense is overrated. The offense is overrated. They have big weaknesses.
Well, here's the thing, too. Their weakness is run defense, and we have one of the best rush offenses in the league, ranked third.
So let's see exactly where they're at in rush defense. They're ranked 28th in yards allowed per attempt. They've allowed 5.3 yards per attempt, and realistically, they haven't been facing like great running backs. Like they faced the Packers, who kind of gouged them up, and obviously they have a couple good running backs, but
no,
they didn't have a great game. It was the Eagles' rush offense that really tore them to shreds.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Now, would you say the Lions' rush offense is pretty?
Oh, it's elite right now. Yeah, it's elite.
Now, comparing, the Swift should have a big game, in my opinion. Then.
Yeah, I mean, so here's one thing I've noticed that's been different from last year with the rush offenses. Last year, they were trying to do creative things with Jamal Williams, and they were trying to do creative things with Swift. And what they've switched is they've started to say, okay, look, even when we do something creative with Jamal Williams and we open holes, Jamal doesn't go anywhere.
Right. No, he's going to get you like 5 yards, maybe 4 or 5 yards a pop.
I mean, he's not at all, though. He's not getting anywhere near that. Right now, Jamal is at 3.5 yards a carry. But what they've done, though, is they've been really smart because the Lions are what? They're a grinded out team, right? And what they're doing is they're using Jamal to grind out runs. They're using Jamal to pound the defense, which is why there's a really interesting stat right now that I find to be illuminating as to what they're doing. And that is in the advanced rushing stats, yards before contact for DeAndre Swift is 6.2, and for Jamal Williams, it's 2.6.
So a big jump from Swift then, huh?
And yards before contact, which tells me a couple of things. First of all, DeAndre Swift is a lot faster than Jamal. But secondly, that they're really trying to open up holes and give Swift a chance to explode. With Jamal, they're more using him between the tackles and in more traditional ways as a grinded out running back, which I think is actually really smart. Because you don't want to I know that we have guys who are like, oh, DeAndre Swift's got to be a bell cow back, give him 50 carries a game. No, realistically, Swift needs to be a guy who carries it 15 to 20 times a game, and those, as many as humanly possible, need to be really creative runs that give him the most space possible to do what Swift does best. If you're going to run it in between the tackles, you're going to run it into traffic, just give Jamal that job. Jamal loves that job. He loves banging into people. That's what he does well. So, and that's one thing they've improved over last year is because, whenever you got Jamal in space, he wasn't going to go very far anyways. So it's that was a big thing. Now,
well, we should have done hard knocks. Deuce was tough on Swift for a reason to get all those extra yards out of him.
Deuce really helped Swift turn it around. So the rush offense is good. Minnesota's a garbage rush defense this year, and I don't think that's going to change this week. They're actually better against the pass. They've only allowed one passing touchdown all year. Well, in the 2 games, one passing touchdown, and they've actually got 2 interceptions. So they're in that. The pass defense is good, so it'll be interesting to see what they do in that scenario. How that goes for the Lions. I'm really interested to see that. So, yeah, it's gonna be a really good game. I think playing in Minnesota is a big disadvantage, but ultimately, it's a winnable game, and sweeping the Vikings could very well be the difference between a playoff spot and not.
I don't know, man. Well, the best If you're telling me that they only allowed one passing touchdown all year, and their rush defense is really weak, do what you do best and run the ball. You're third in the league in rushing.
Yeah, I mean, so I wouldn't buy too much into that because number one, the the Eagles went up pretty fast and hard against them, and then kind of just ran the clock out. I mean, they had a lot of rushes. They had 34 runs compared to 26 to 31 passes. So they actually the Eagles ran the ball more than they actually passed against Minnesota because they were up 24-7 in the first half. Mm-hmm. So they really were unaggressive. So that's part of the reason why their passing touchdowns are way down. And the passing touchdowns, 2 of them were runs by Hurts, where he could have easily have passed, and he just chose to keep it himself and run. And the first week against Green Bay was just an absolute disaster. The whole offense and defense, Green Bay was just utterly lost in week 1. I told you guys, remember you guys were like, we're going to lose against Minnesota. I was like, well, let's see what they do against the Eagles first, because when I watched the Green Bay Minnesota game, a lot of the issues that Green Bay were having were self-inflicted. I wasn't really impressed with Minnesota's game at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree, especially because the Eagles showing. I remember I was still pretty doubtful. Especially because the Vikings have always been a team that, like, they've always had like a bunch of like good players on paper, but it's always just been more of a coaching thing, in my opinion, where they've never been able to get it all the way. I was not convinced that Kevin O'Connell is that dude. Still not.
No, neither you or Rams House were impressed with him.
Nope.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, cool. But like I said, neither you or Rams House were impressed with him.
Yeah. And then, I guess since we're talking about the Vikings, like, how do you guys have your score and predictions for this game, or are you guys still like unsure of how you think the game will go?
We're scoring over 30, so I'm going to go 35. 35-28 Lions.
35-28 Lions. And
I'll say 31 to I'll say 31-17.
31-17, dang.
Yeah,
I like that. That's only one more in mine. I think I was 31-24 the other day. But
I could see somewhere in that range. I could see the Lions scoring between 28-35 points, and I have the Vikings somewhere between 17 and 24.
Yeah.
I don't know. Man, Kirk looked really bad to me. Cook hasn't looked like himself this year. Jefferson got shut down by Slay pretty severely, but also Kirk just looked bad. And I don't know. I think if they can get to him, you got a rotation of Bryant and Harris and Hutch, and if they can get any kind of pressure on Kirk, man, Kirk's mistake prone.
Rams House, we got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think Okuda's going to do against Jefferson?
I mean, there's no reason he shouldn't do well. He did well against Scary Terry. I think Scary Terry is almost as good as Jefferson.
Really?
I think that Jefferson's a top 5.
Yeah, and I agree. He's top 5, and I have Scary Terry at 8. Maybe 9.
Okay, so top 10, top 5. I mean, okay.
Yeah, I got to look at it. Scary Terry's had Carson Wentz and freaking Taylor Heineke throwing him the football. It's like he's actually had, like, his whole career, he's had garbage quarterbacks throwing him the ball. So the fact that Scary Terry's done what he's done with who he's had at quarterback is pretty incredible. And if you watch that guy run routes and catch, he's every bit elite, man. Every bit elite.
Right. You know what's funny? I got into, like, I was watching, like, Chiefs fan and a Bears fan, and he said the Bears are going to beat the Lions, and I told him, dude, we're putting 35 on your head.
The Bears have looked pretty horrific, haven't they?
Yeah, and he said, like, they probably score like a good 48. I'm like, no, you're not.
Well,
your offense is horrible.
Yeah, well, and I think the big thing is Kirk is someone who I think can get stopped at pressure. I mean, we've seen that. And I think that we can do that. And I think that we can stop Cook. He is having a down year. I think we're capable of doing it. I don't know if you saw the Brian Baldinger thread. I can't share that because I don't want to risk copyright. Like, there are spots I think that we can show and we can do. I think that we could, limit how we handle Cook. But also, I do think that, quarterback play can definitely affect it. And I do think guys like, Justin Fields, as you were talking about, or Kirk are also good examples of why you can't just have anybody out there.
Right.
The freaking Bears took a risk and they grabbed Justin Fields and he went awful. I mean, I remember when a bunch of people wanted Justin Fields over Jared. And Justin Fields
I was one of those people.
Yeah. And look at Justin. Justin's played worse than Jared has the last 2 seasons.
Justin's been terrible. He had a QBR of 6.7 last game. You can't get any worse.
And so, it's just
really bad.
Yeah, well, that's just one of the things is, I'm out here just really happy that we got a guy like Goff who's been doing his work and doing traditional. And also, ironically, Jared actually does do a pretty good job versus the Minnesota Vikings. In fact, it's arguably his best career game, besides from maybe Kansas City. Perfect passer rating, like 5 touchdowns, I think. And, he's I think he could kill it.
Actually, I can look this up. Let's see. Jared Goff versus Minnesota. He has played Minnesota 4 times in his career, and he's 2-2, but he's got 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions against them in 4 games.
Well, and what's crazy about that 2-2 is he actually nearly won the other ones. I think the other 2-2, one of the losses is that missed field goal that we had.
Yep, that's true. That should have been a win. Yeah.
I feel like he plays best against the Cardinals for some odd reason.
Well, he dominates the Cardinals, but he's pretty good against Minnesota. That's a solid passer rating. 1,200 yards. I mean, his averages in those games are 300 yards, 2 touchdowns a game in those games. So he only has 2 interceptions, so half an interception. So he's having a pretty stellar game against the Vikings in those 4 games so far. I don't see a reason why the offense doesn't keep doing what it's doing, go over 30. 35, maybe it's possible. I wouldn't be surprised. But over 30, I'm expecting over 30.
So the Lions have had a lot of drops, by the way. Do you guys think that's going to affect us versus Minnesota?
I think that's going to stop versus Minnesota.
Really?
It's an aberration. Drops at this rate are absurd. I'll tell you exactly why I say that. Last year's drop leaders in the entire NFL for a team was – hold on, it's loading. The highest drops last year in all of football was the New Orleans Saints. 30 drops, 6.3% was the drops percentage, right? This year – to date, the Lions are dropping 12.7. So literally double, exactly double that amount of the last year's leaders. Teams have bad games. Teams revert to the mean, and they start to slow down on drops. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if there's 0 drops in this game.
Wow.
Because they've been dropping at an alarming rate. Hawk hasn't had a drop problem historically. Amon-Ra hasn't had a drop problem historically. I think part of this is nerves. Part of this is didn't play enough in the preseason. There's a lot of little contributing factors. And I think that's what everything you've heard about in the first 2 weeks, from Jared Goff to Ben Johnson to Aaron Glenn to Dan Campbell, has been, we got to clean up the little things.
Right, and drops is one of them.
And drops is probably the main one for the offense.
I'm going to ask you this, too. So if we clean up the drops, so does Hot or Chark have a good game? Chark?
Yeah, I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see your first 40-yard plus completion from Jared to Chark this game. Who's going to keep up with him? 33-year-old Patrick Peterson?
Oh yeah.
I mean, realistically, there's not a corner on that team that can keep up with DJ Chark running at full speed.
Yeah. And would Amon-Ra have a good? Hopefully, Amon-Ra has a good game.
So what will happen? Yeah, I mean, so do I. But what's going to happen? What happens with that situation? 140-yard bomb, and the defense goes, "Well, we can't let that happen again." And then the underneath stuff gets opened up, and those 5, 10, 15-yard passes to Amon-Ra are wide open. But I think Chark is – I mean, look, if you're DJ Chark and you just had 0 catches in a game and you're trying to earn your next contract and you know that a big reason you have 0 catches last game is your fault. You know that even the deep ball from Jared to Chark, the flea flicker one, right? That ball was catchable. I know it slipped through his fingertips and he was extending, but I think DJ Chark knows in the back of his head he could have run a little bit faster. He could have maybe dove for that ball, because ultimately DJ Chark's not going. He's not coming going, oh, Jared just didn't. He just threw it a little too hard because really it was right there. Like it touched his fingers. If you're DJ Chark and you really want to be a man that's like trying to improve, you're going to go, okay, I could have run a little bit faster on that route. I could have dove for it. I could have been in a better position. Like you're looking at yourself internally and seeing what you can do better because you can't put your future earnings in Jared Goff's hands. What can you do to improve? The touchdown pass to the left side that hit both of his hands and didn't get caught. DJ Chark's going, okay, maybe I should have gone up for that ball. Maybe I should have, maybe I should have been. You got to. If you're DJ Chark and you're trying to earn your next big paycheck, you got to turn that around right now. You got to.
Oh, yeah. I gotta agree. And do you think that Hawkinson will improve throughout the season, or do you think he's just not looking like he's going to improve?
I mean, I'm starting to think that he's not going to improve that much. I doubt he continues dropping the ball at this rate, but we all want him to be like a 70 to 80 yard guy, like routinely get 70 to 80 yards. He may just be more of a 40 to 50 yard guy, man. That's might be the sad truth.
Yeah, that is sad. Well, too though, and two, he's not really a tackle breaker.
Yeah, he doesn't fall down after the catch.
He's not really a tackle breaker, and he's just been disappointing so far. There's no other way around it. He only had 1 drop last year. He already has 2 this year. He's dropping 14% of his passes. He's not. He's just not doing it.
But you expect Chark to get better.
I do expect Chark to get better.
Okay, but Hawk's toast in your opinion.
I don't think he's toast. I mean, I just see so many. I think maybe he was just over evaluated by myself included. I think maybe he's just not as good as he thought he was.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's not blocking as well as I thought he would coming out of college. He's not catching as well as I thought he would coming out of college. Or even really as much as you might have thought after the 2020 season, 723 yards and 6 TDs. And he's just, I don't know, he's catching more balls. He's not, his yards per target's down. I don't know. I want Hawk to turn it around. I think he'll end up with a decent season that'll probably earn him another paycheck from a different team. But
do you think he's a vertical deep threat wide receiver?
Chark?
No, Hawk.
No, I don't. He doesn't have the speed for that, and he's not good enough at contested catches. That's been one of the areas I've been most disappointed with him at is not necessarily contested catches, just like catching in traffic. He doesn't seem very good at catching.
He's such a big body too, though. You expect him to come down with those balls.
There was a pass to him that everyone said Jared missed in the third, I want to say, and it was a pass where Hawk kind of looked like he had a layout for it, and it hit his hands. He didn't catch it, and everyone's like, "Oh, bad pass by Jared." But Dion pointed out that Hawk had gone to the hash because landmarks are important for running receivers and stuff when you're trying to get open for the quarterback. And he had gone to the hash mark. He turned, and Jared threw it where he was at, and for some reason Hawk moved to the left a couple steps, and so then the throw ended up being inaccurate. But Dion was like, yeah, when he watched that, it was clear that Hawk had moved off the spot he had found in the zone. And Jared threw it to the spot he had kind of settled in, and then he moved. So it's just stuff like that, man. It's a lot of little stuff.
Yeah. And then I guess here's my last question I saw a couple people talking about is, will teams adjust to Ben Johnson's scheme? And do you think Ben Johnson will respond well to people adjusting to his scheme?
I think it'll adjust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're going to adjust to a scheme for sure. But part of what makes it hard to adjust to is that it's really hard to adjust to the running scheme aspect of it, right? Like what they're doing in the running game is super creative. Like somebody posted it, they were like, in the first half, they employed like 8 different kinds of running plays. They were just changing it up all the time. The blocking schemes change. It's really wild. And then the secondary aspect of that is in the passing game, there's a lot of misdirection. There's not, like now you got to watch out for Amon Ra on the end arounds. You never know when Jared's going to hand it to them. He's going to go for 60 yards. So it's like there's a lot of wrinkles. It's a hard thing to adjust to. And then he's going to have to counter adjust, but then JMO's going to come back and it's going to add a whole wrinkle to the whole mess.
I agree.
So what do you expect? So you expecting a top like a we're the number 2 offense in the league at the moment.
Number 1.
Oh, number 1 offense. So we're ahead of the Chiefs.
Bills are number 1, but they have a pick 6 that doesn't count towards offensive points. So number 1 scoring offense in the NFL right now is the Lions.
Nice. Yeah, man, I'm very excited to see what we do. That's all I have time for. Thank you guys for coming on. I think it was a good roundtable. I guess if you guys have any other final partings, I guess if you want to talk about. Guess you guys can have one.
I'm good.
Are you concerned with these injuries?
Worried about the injuries?
Yeah.
Not really.
Not really.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. You guys are a big help and always helping my channel, especially you, Rams House, man. You've come in and helped. So thank you. And thank you, Onepride, for always, of course, already being on the stream. And yeah, so see you guys all later in the viewers and Onepride, and see y'all later.
All right.